The October night wrapped around Greystone, Pennsylvania like a cold fist. Wind carried the scent of dying leaves and distant wood smoke through empty streets. At 11:47, Declan Hawthorne pulled his battered Ford pickup into the Hillcrest gas station, the engine shuddering once before falling silent. He sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the wheel. 42 years old, and tonight he felt every single one of them pressed into his bones. His muscles screamed from the double shift at ironclad steel. The red neon glow from the station sign cast harsh shadows across his weathered face as he finally climbed out. His work boots crunched against loose gravel. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered like dying stars. He unscrewed his gas cap, already thinking about home, about his daughter Wren, 13 years old and staying with her grandmother tonight, about the stack of bills waiting on the kitchen counter, about Celeste, his wife, gone 2 years now. Cancer had taken her slowly, painfully, leaving him and Wren to navigate a world that suddenly seemed far too large and far too empty. The sound came without warning, a sharp cry, cut short, then the unmistakable sounds of struggle coming from behind the station, where dumpsters sat shrouded in darkness. Declan froze, gas nozzle halfway to the tank. 20 years of civilian life hadn't dulled the combat instincts forged during 4 tours in Afghanistan with the Special Forces. Those sounds meant trouble. The smart play was to call 911, wait safely in his truck, let someone else handle it. But Declan Hawthorne had never been good at letting someone else handle things. He set the nozzle down and moved silently toward the corner of the building, staying low, using shadows for cover. The military training took over like muscle memory. Assess, decide, act. No hesitation. As he rounded the corner, the scene crystallized with terrible clarity. 3 men in dark clothing surrounded a woman. They were dragging her toward a black panel van, its side door yawning open like a hungry mouth. She fought with surprising strength, her long dark hair whipping as she twisted against their grip. One man had her arms pinned behind her back. Another was trying to secure tape over her mouth. The third, a hulking figure with neck tattoos visible even in the dim light, was struggling to control her kicking legs. "Stop fighting, princess," the largest one growled. "Nobody's coming to help you." Declan's mind calculated odds and angles in the space between heartbeats. 3 against 1. Poor lighting. Unknown if they were armed. Every rational thought screamed at him to retreat and call for help. But some decisions don't wait for rational thought. "Don't move." His voice cut through the night air. Low, dangerous, carrying the authority of a man who had commanded soldiers in situations far worse than this. All 4 figures froze. The woman's eyes found him in the darkness, wide with fear, but suddenly kindled with desperate hope. "Walk away, friend." The largest kidnapper straightened, revealing a frame that topped Declan 6 feet by several inches. "This isn't your problem." Declan stepped forward into the pool of security light. His stance betrayed nothing of the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Years at the mill had kept him strong. Years in combat had made him dangerous. "The lady doesn't seem to agree with you." The second man laughed without humor. "You got a death wish?" 3 of us. 1 of you. Never was good at math." The big man's hand moved toward his jacket. Metal glinted in the weak light. A knife. "Final warning. Walk away now, and you get to go home tonight." Time slowed to crystalline clarity. The world narrowed to essential information. Threats, distances, angles of attack. Declan allowed himself a cold smile, the kind that had made enemy combatants reconsider their choices in the mountains of Afghanistan. "Not happening." The big man's hand came out fast, blade catching the security light, but Declan was already moving. He closed the distance before the knife could fully clear its sheath, driving his shoulder into the man's midsection. They crashed into the van's side with a metallic thunder. The knife clattered away across the asphalt. The wiry one came next, Wild punches that Declan deflected with movements drilled into muscle memory. A quick strike to the solar plexus doubled the attacker over, gasping for air. The third man grabbed a tire iron from inside the van, swung it in a vicious arc. Declan sidestepped, caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted until he heard a pop. The weapon fell free. A knee to the ribs sent the attacker stumbling backward into the dumpster with a crash that echoed across the empty lot. The leader recovered quickly, blood trickling from where his head had struck the van. But rather than press the attack, he assessed the situation. One man struggling to breathe. Another slumped against the dumpster, cradling his arm. He made the rational choice. "This ain't over," he snarled, jerking his head toward his companions. "Move it!" They scrambled toward the van, helping each other inside. The engine roared to life. Tires squealed as they peeled away into the darkness. Declan memorized the license plate by reflex, though he suspected it would lead nowhere useful. The woman stood frozen against the station wall. Now that the immediate danger had passed, he could see her more clearly. Early 30s, dressed in clothes that had once been expensive, but were now torn and dirty. A bruise was forming on her left cheek, but her eyes remained alert, watching him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "You all right?" He kept his distance. After trauma, some people needed space. "Thank you." Her voice carried the cultured tones of expensive education and high society. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't—" She stopped, as if the alternative was too horrible to voice. "We should call the police." "No." The word burst from her with surprising force. Seeing his expression, she modulated her tone. "I mean, yes, but can we go somewhere safe first? I don't think they've gone far." Something in her expression made Declan pause. Fear layered over calculation. This wasn't just about the attack. There was more to this story. Much more. "My truck's right out front. I can take you to the police station in Millbrook, about 10 minutes down the road." Relief washed over her face. That would be perfect. They walked around to the front of the station. Even disheveled and frightened, she carried herself with unconscious confidence, the kind that came from a lifetime of privilege and control. It seemed at odds with the vulnerability she'd just shown. "I'm Declan, by the way. Declan Hawthorne." "Vivian." She settled into the passenger seat of his truck, hesitated briefly. "Vivian Ashford." The name didn't register with Declan, but something in her delivery, a slight pause as if waiting for recognition, made him file it away. He paid for his gas quickly, and they pulled out of the station, headlights cutting through darkness as they descended the winding mountain road toward town. He checked his mirrors constantly, making sure that black van wasn't following. "You didn't hesitate back there." Vivian's voice broke the silence. "Most people would have hidden and called for help. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. Military, army, 4 tours in Afghanistan, special forces." She nodded slowly, as if this explained everything. The Millbrook police station occupied a modest brick building on Maple Street. Officer Maria Diaz took their statements with the thoroughness of someone who had seen enough violence to take every report seriously. She photographed Vivian's bruises, collected Declan's description of the attackers, and put out an alert for the black van. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" For the first time since the attack, Vivian looked uncertain. "I was staying at the Grand View on Route 19. Diaz frowned. "The Grand View's been closed for renovations. Over 2 months now." Silence stretched uncomfortably. Vivian's cheeks flushed, caught in a lie she hadn't intended to tell. Outside in the parking lot, she stood beside his truck, looking lost. The confidence she'd shown inside seemed to evaporate in the cool night air. "You could stay at my place," Declan offered. "I have a guest room. My daughter's at her grandmother's tonight." Vivian studied his face. "You don't know anything about me. I know you needed help. That's enough." The drive to Declan's house took them through the older part of Millbrook, Victorian homes on tree-lined streets. His home was a modest two-story craftsman with a wraparound porch. Even in the dark, Vivian could see flower boxes under the windows, a vegetable garden along one side. "It's beautiful," she said as they walked up the front steps. "Celeste's design. My wife. She had a gift for making places feel like home." Had? She passed 2 years ago. Cancer. Inside, family photos covered the mantel above a stone fireplace. Vivian studied them while Declan made tea. A beautiful woman with warm eyes appeared in most of them. Celeste. And pictures of a younger Wren, gap-toothed and grinning. "She was beautiful," Vivian said softly when Declan returned. "The finest person I ever knew." He handed her the tea. She could make anyone feel welcome within 10 minutes. They sat in comfortable silence until Vivian spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Why did you really help me?" Declan considered the question. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I hadn't. Celeste used to say we're all responsible for each other, whether we want to be or not. Those men tonight, they seemed to know me, called me princess. Was this really random?" Vivian was quiet for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were conflicted. "It's complicated. Most things worth talking about are." She made a decision. "I'm not from around here. I was supposed to meet someone. They never showed. And somehow those men found me." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Until she was ready to trust him with the real story, he wouldn't push. Morning came with the smell of bacon and coffee drifting up the stairs. Vivian found Declan at the stove, already dressed for work. Heavy pants, steel-toed boots, a shirt with the ironclad steel logo. "Morning." He looked up with a genuine smile. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in ages." They ate in companionable silence until the phone rang. Declan answered on the second ring. "Hawthorne residence." A pause. "No, wrong number. There's no one here by that name." He hung up, frowning. Someone asking for a Miss Preston. Said they were from a security company. Vivian's fork froze halfway to her mouth. For just a moment, panic flashed across her face. "Vivian, what's going on?" She set down her fork, took a deep breath. "My real name is Vivian Ashford. My father is Theodore Ashford." The name hit Declan like a physical blow. Even someone who lived as far from high finance as he did knew that name. Ashford Global was one of the largest private corporations in the country. Forbes had estimated Theodore Ashford's personal wealth at somewhere north of $15 billion. "You're Theodore Ashford's daughter. His only heir." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. "And apparently he's decided I've had enough freedom for one lifetime." Before Declan could respond, the sound of vehicles filled the quiet morning. Not one car, several, their engines purring with expensive precision. Vivian went white as she looked out the front window. 3 black SUVs sat in the driveway, tinted windows reflecting the morning sun, men in dark suits climbing out, security personnel with earpieces and professional movements. My father's employees. They found me. A knock at the front door, firm, polite, but insistent. Declan looked at the woman who had stumbled into his life less than 12 hours ago. Then at the photographs of Celeste on the mantel. "Stay here. This is my house. Nobody takes anyone from my house against their will." He opened the front door to find 8 men in precise formation. The leader was built like a linebacker. "Mr. Hawthorne, I'm Dominic Vance, head of security for Ashford Global. Miss Ashford's father has requested her immediate return. Miss Ashford is a guest in my home. She's free to leave whenever she chooses." Vance's expression didn't change. "I don't think you understand the situation." "I understand perfectly. You're standing on my property without my permission. In Pennsylvania, I have certain rights regarding trespassers." For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other. Finally, something in Declan's stance made Vance reconsider. We'll wait at the street, but we're not leaving without her. She leaves when she decides to leave. Declan went back inside. Vivian stood in the hallway, her expression somewhere between awe and confusion. No one's ever made them back down before. I'm not most people. His phone rang. The voice that came through was older, cultured, carrying unmistakable authority. Mr. Hawthorne, this is Theodore Ashford. I believe we need to talk about my daughter. Theodore Ashford's voice filled Declan's kitchen through the speakerphone. I appreciate your assistance in keeping Vivian safe. However, she belongs at home where proper security arrangements can be made. I'm prepared to offer $75,000 for any inconvenience. Vivian's hands clenched at her sides. Mr. Ashford, your daughter is a guest in my home. I don't take money to hand people over against their will. A long pause. You're making a mistake, Mr. Hawthorne. I don't make the same offer twice. Then I guess we understand each other. The call ended. Silence filled the kitchen. He won't stop. Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. He never stops. Let him try. She stared at him. Why? Why would you do this for someone you just met? Because you asked for help, and because my wife taught me that helping people isn't something you do when it's convenient. It's something you do when it matters. Vivian walked to the window, watching the security team repositioning on the street. The head of security, Dominic Vance, reports directly to Preston Mercer, our CFO. Her voice hardened. Preston has been with the company for 20 years. He's been waiting for my father to retire so he can take control. The only thing standing in his way is me. You think he's behind this? I think Preston would do anything to prove I'm unfit to lead, including staging a kidnapping to show my father how vulnerable I am without proper supervision. She turned back to face him. 3 months ago, there was a hostile takeover attempt. A consortium of investors tried to acquire enough stock to force my father out. It failed, but barely. In their SEC filings, they specifically mentioned me, called me the weak link, said Ashford Global would be vulnerable after the succession because I was untested and easily manipulated. The implications hit Declan like ice water. You think someone orchestrated the kidnapping to prove their point? Or to remove me from the equation entirely? Preston was the only board member who voted against fighting the takeover. My father dismissed it as pragmatism, but now I wonder. The retaliation came faster than even Vivian had expected. By noon, Declan received a call from his supervisor at Ironclad Steel. He'd been suspended pending investigation into conflicts of interest related to major stakeholders in the company's financing structure. By 2 o'clock, every news van in the Tri-County area was parked on Maple Street, reporters shouting questions, cameras capturing every movement. By 4 o'clock, Ironclad Steel announced it would be accelerating its planned workforce reduction. 347 workers would receive termination notices by the end of the week. 18 months of planned transition compressed into 7 days. Vivian watched the news coverage with mounting horror. This is my father. He's punishing the entire community because I won't come quietly. Can he do that? Ashford Global has investments in the fund that holds Ironclad's debt. A phone call, a hint that financing might be at risk. She shook her head. He's done this before, just never somewhere I could see the human cost. The front door burst open. Wren stood there, backpack hanging from one shoulder, her grandmother behind her. The 13-year-old's eyes were red from crying. Dad, what's happening? Why are there cameras everywhere? Jessica Miller said her dad's losing his job because of you. Declan pulled his daughter into a hug. Come inside, sweetheart. We need to talk. Wren spotted Vivian standing in the kitchen doorway. Her tear-streaked face hardened. Who is she? Why is everyone saying you're using some rich lady for money? This is Vivian. I helped her when she was in trouble last night. And now some people are trying to cause problems because of it. Ren studied Vivian with unflinching assessment. You're the one on TV, the billionaire's daughter. Yes. Your dad is the one getting everyone fired? Vivian flinched. He's trying to pressure me to come home. He's using this town to do it. That's messed up. Something shifted in Ren's expression. Not acceptance exactly, but understanding. She'd lost her mother to something beyond anyone's control. She recognized the look of someone trapped by circumstances they hadn't chosen. Are you going to fix it? Vivian blinked. What? You're a billionaire, right? Or you will be. So are you going to fix what your dad's doing? Or are you just going to stand there feeling bad about it? The question hung between them. Declan watched his daughter with pride. I don't know if I can, Vivian admitted. Mom used to say that. Ren dropped her backpack on the couch. She'd say, I don't know if I can do this. And then she'd do it anyway. She said that's what being brave means. Not knowing if you can, but trying anyway. That night after Ren had gone to bed, Declan and Vivian sat at the kitchen table. The television played muted in the background. News coverage of the layoff announcements. Interviews with worried families. There has to be something we can do, Declan said. Vivian was quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen. What if, instead of running away from Ashford Global, I used it? What if I could prove that helping this community was actually good business? Go on. The Riverside Community Center. It's been abandoned for years. What if we turned it into something? A training center. A place where workers losing their jobs at the steel mill could learn new skills. Renewable energy technology, solar panel installation, battery systems, all things Ashford Global is investing in anyway. You're talking about retraining 300 people. I'm talking about creating a model, a pilot program. If we can prove it works here, it could be replicated everywhere. It's not charity, it's strategy. Ren had been quietly listening from the kitchen doorway. Now she spoke up. Can I say something? The adults turned to look at her. Mom used to tell me this thing. She said, if you don't like the book you're reading, write a different one. Don't burn down the library. Vivian frowned. What do you mean? You keep talking about fighting your dad's company, but it's going to be your company someday, right? Ren shrugged with the simple logic of youth. So why not just change what the company does? Instead of running away from it, make it into something you actually want to run. The room went silent. Declan stared at his daughter with wonder. 13 years old, and she had just cut through weeks of complicated planning with a single observation. She's right, Vivian said slowly. I don't need to escape Ashford Global. I need to transform it. The idea took root over the following days. Vivian worked the phones relentlessly, reaching out to contacts who might help despite her father's influence. Declan mobilized the community. Hector Ruiz from the Steelworkers Union brought 50 workers to a meeting at the abandoned community center. Sarah Lawson from the Chamber of Commerce provided market analysis. The interview with Channel 5 News came next. Reporter Carol Martinez gave them 10 uninterrupted minutes to present their vision. This isn't about charity, Vivian told the cameras. It's about proving that corporate responsibility and profit don't have to be enemies. Declan spoke about the community. No one here is asking for handouts. They're asking for opportunity, a chance to build new lives when the old ones are being taken away. The video went viral. Hashtag Greystone Rising began trending. The vandalism was discovered at dawn. Declan arrived at the Riverside Community Center to find the front windows shattered. Glass covered the entrance like scattered diamonds. Spray painted across the brick wall in angry red letters, 3 feet high. Fraud. Inside was worse. Furniture overturned. Equipment smashed. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to the walls, leaving gaping holes. Hector Ruiz stood in the middle of the destruction. Found it like this when I came to check the renovation progress. Vandals or message? Message. Too targeted. They broke things that would be expensive to fix but didn't burn the place down. Someone wants to scare you off. Word spread quickly. By noon, something unexpected happened. 50 volunteers showed up with brooms and trash bags. Mike Santos brought plywood for the windows. Workers who had received termination notices from Ironclad Steel arrived in their work clothes, ready to rebuild. The message of intimidation had backfired spectacularly. Instead of breaking the community spirit, it had united them. They don't understand this town, Hector said, watching the volunteers work. We've survived mine closures, factory shutdowns, and economic collapse. A little graffiti isn't going to stop us now. That evening, Preston Mercer held a press conference. His face filled the television screen with practiced concern. The proposal being floated by Vivian Ashford represents her personal initiative, not company policy. The board has serious concerns about the financial viability of the project as described. Furthermore, given Vivian's recent personal difficulties and unauthorized absence, the board has temporarily reassigned her portfolio responsibilities. Vivian watched with mounting anger. He's not just saying no, he's poisoning the well, making sure no one else will work with us. The night before she was scheduled to present to Ashford Global's board, Vivian found Declan on the front porch. Scared? He asked. Terrified. My father has spent my entire life telling me what I'm capable of, and it's never been much. What do you think you're capable of? I don't know. That's the honest answer. I've never been allowed to find out. Declan turned to look at her. Celeste was like that when I met her, convinced she couldn't do anything important. Her family had told her she wasn't smart enough, wasn't talented enough. Took me 3 years to convince her they were wrong. What changed her mind? She started believing in herself, not because I told her to, because she finally gave herself permission to try. Vivian looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in years. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your daughter's school tomorrow. We'll be watching. Declan felt his blood run cold. The threat against Ren changed everything. Declan's first instinct was to pull his daughter from school, lock down the house, prepare for siege. But Vivian stopped him. This is Preston Mercer. Has to be. He's trying to intimidate us into backing down. I don't care about corporate politics. Someone threatened my daughter. I know, and we're going to handle it, but not by hiding, by exposing him. The plan came together quickly. Vivian reached out to a private investigator whose loyalty couldn't be bought by her father's money. Within 48 hours, they had evidence. Preston Mercer had been quietly acquiring land around Greystone for months. Thousands of acres, purchased through shell companies. Property that would skyrocket in value if the Sustainable Development Initiative succeeded. He was positioning himself to profit from the very project he was trying to destroy. But that wasn't the worst of it. The investigator traced the threatening text to a phone registered to one of Preston's security consultants. The same consultant who had connections to the men who had tried to kidnap Vivian at the gas station. He orchestrated everything, Vivian realized. The kidnapping attempt, to scare my father into tightening control, to make me look unstable, and when that didn't work, he threatened Ren. The evidence was damning. Securities fraud, conspiracy, threatening a minor. Theodore Ashford arrived in Greystone the morning of the board presentation. His helicopter descended on the high school football field, drawing crowds who had never seen such a display of wealth in person. He emerged flanked by security personnel, looking every inch the corporate titan at 68 years old. But this time, he came alone. Preston Mercer was notably absent. The meeting took place at the Red Oak Cafe. Theodore sat across from Vivian and Declan, his expression unreadable. Before you say anything, Vivian began, there's something you need to see. She laid out the evidence against Preston, the land purchases, the connection to the kidnapping attempt, the threat against Wren, document after document painting a picture of betrayal. Theodore studied each piece in silence. When he finally looked up, something behind his eyes had shifted. How long have you known about this? I suspected for months, but I couldn't prove it until now. Why didn't you come to me? Because you wouldn't have believed me. Because Preston has spent 20 years making himself indispensable while making me seem incompetent. Because every time I tried to assert myself, you sided with him. Theodore was quiet for a long moment. Your mother used to tell me I was too controlling, that I would drive you away if I didn't learn to let go. So you built a cage and called it love. The words hit their mark. Theodore flinched. Before he could respond, the cafe door opened. Wren walked in, still wearing her school backpack. She stopped short at the sight of Theodore Ashford. You're Vivian's dad. And you must be Wren. Wren walked straight up to him. No fear, no deference. Just the direct honesty of a child who had learned early that life was too short for pretense. My mom died 2 years ago. Before she did, she told me something. She said that when you have a chance to help someone, you should take it, because that's how we leave our mark on the world. Theodore listened in silence. My dad helped Vivian because that's what Mom would have wanted. He didn't know she was rich or important. He just knew she needed help. Wren's voice grew stronger. You have all the money in the world, but your daughter had to run away from you. My dad doesn't have anything except this house, but I'd never want to be anywhere else. Maybe money can't buy the things that really matter. The room was absolutely silent. Theodore sat motionless for a long moment. Memories played behind his eyes. Regrets. Finally, he spoke. His voice was different, quieter, less like a CEO and more like a father. When your mother died, he said to Vivian, I made myself a promise. I would never let anything hurt you. I would protect you from everything. He paused. I didn't realize that I was the thing hurting you most. Dad, let me finish. He held up a hand. I've spent 15 years building walls around you. I told myself it was for your safety, but this girl just showed me what I couldn't see. He stood slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the small town that had become the battleground for his family's future. Her father has nothing. A small house, an old truck, a suspended job. But she would never run away from him because he gave her something I never gave you, freedom to become who she's meant to be. He turned back to face his daughter. I can't undo 15 years of mistakes in one day, but I can start. Show me your presentation, the real one, and Preston Mercer will not be in the room. The board meeting convened that afternoon via video conference. 12 faces arranged in boxes on a large screen. Theodore sat in the room, watching his daughter present her vision. Vivian spoke for 45 minutes, not just about numbers, but about people, about Hector Ruiz, who had worked at Ironclad Steel for 30 years, about Sarah Lawson, who had watched her downtown businesses struggle, about 347 families who deserved a chance. When she finished, the questions came. Pointed, challenging. Vivian answered each one with confidence and conviction. The vote came quickly, 9-3 in favor. The Greystone Sustainable Development Initiative was approved. $15 million in initial funding, with Vivian appointed as Director of Sustainable Development. But the day wasn't over. Theodore called an emergency session. Evidence against Preston Mercer was presented. The land purchases, the kidnapping connection, the threat against Wren. By unanimous vote, Preston was terminated immediately. SEC investigators were notified. Security escorted Preston from the building. His protests echoed down the hallway as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You'll regret this, all of you. Theodore watched him go without expression. The company was built by my father. You were just an employee who forgot his place. That evening, Declan found Vivian standing outside the Riverside Community Center, the building that would soon become something new. "We did it," she said softly. "You did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You gave me something I haven't had in years." "What's that?" "Someone who believed I was worth fighting for. Not because of my last name, just because." Declan reached out and took her hand. "Celeste would have liked you. She always had a soft spot for stubborn people who refused to give up." Vivian laughed. A real laugh. The first one he'd heard from her. "Is that what I am? Stubborn?" "Among other things." They stood there in the gathering darkness, hands intertwined. "What happens now?" Declan asked. "Now we build something. Together." Vivian squeezed his hand. "If you're willing." Wren appeared from around the corner. She'd been helping with cleanup. "So is Vivian staying?" Declan looked at Vivian. "I think that's up to her." "I'm staying, for as long as you'll have me." Wren considered this, then nodded with the solemnity of a judge rendering verdict. "Good, because Dad's cooking is terrible. We need someone who knows how to make something besides scrambled eggs." 6 months later, the Hillcrest gas station looked different in spring. Wildflowers bloomed along the roadside. The mountains had traded their winter gray for summer green. Declan pulled his truck up to the pump, the same spot where everything had changed. Vivian climbed out from the passenger seat, a simple engagement ring glinting on her finger. Wren bounded out from the back, her nose buried in a book about solar energy technology. "This is where you met her, right, Dad?" "Right here, almost 7 months ago." Vivian came to stand beside him. "Do you remember what you said that night, when I asked why you helped me?" "I said my wife taught me we're all responsible for each other. I think about that every day now. Every time I see someone complete training at the center, every time another family gets a second chance." She paused. "I think Celeste would be proud. She would, of all of us." The gas station owner came out to greet them. "Declan, great to see you. How's the center doing?" "First graduating class finished last month. 12 people already placed in jobs. Second class started with 50 more. My nephew's in that class. Says it's changing his life." Wren wandered over to the spot behind the station where the van had been parked that night. Vivian joined her. "What are you thinking about?" "Mom." Wren's voice was quiet. "I used to be angry that she died, but now I think maybe she didn't really leave. She's still here, in the things Dad does, in how he raised me." Vivian put an arm around the girl who had become like a daughter. "Your mom sent me to you. I really believe that. She knew your dad needed someone, and she knew you needed a family again." Wren leaned into the embrace. "Is that what we are now? A family?" "If you'll have me." The 13-year-old smiled. "I think Mom would have liked you. I think I would have liked her too." They drove home together, past the community center where construction crews were adding a second building, past the downtown where 3 new businesses had opened, past the mill where remaining workers now had options they'd never had before. At the house on Maple Street, Theodore's helicopter waited in the front yard. He'd taken to visiting regularly, rebuilding his relationship with Vivian one conversation at a time, learning to be a father instead of a controller. Wren ran inside to greet her grandfather with a hug that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Declan and Vivian lingered on the porch. "Any regrets?" she asked. Declan thought about the question, about his job at the mill, now replaced by a position at the training center, about the quiet life he'd lost when he chose to help a stranger, about Celeste, gone but never forgotten. Not one. He pulled Vivian close. Through the window, he could see Wren showing Theodore something on her tablet. His daughter, who had lost so much, finding her way to wholeness again. "You know what Celeste would say about all this?" Vivian looked up at him. "What?" "She'd say that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when you don't think. When you just do what's right and trust the universe to sort out the rest. Is that what you did that night at the gas station? Declan smiled. I stopped thinking, started acting, and everything else followed. Vivian kissed him softly. Best decision you ever made. Second best. What was the first? He looked through the window at the family gathered inside, at the life they'd built from chaos and courage. Asking you to stay. The sun set behind the mountains of Pennsylvania. In Greystone, 347 families were building new futures. In a little house on Maple Street, 3 people who had found each other against all odds were building something even more important. A home. Sometimes the biggest changes begin with the smallest choices. A decision to stop at a gas station. A choice to help instead of hide. A moment of courage that creates ripples spreading outward forever. Declan Hawthorne had saved a stranger's life on an October night, but in doing so, he had saved something else too. He had saved his own. The end.